Please welcome the Executive Director of Chinese Language and Cultural Initiatives for the College Board, Bob Davis.
掌声有请大学理事会中国语言和文化项目组执行主任戴敬山先生。
Hi everybody, how's it going? You enjoying your lunch? Excellent. We have a full house, as you can see today. And I also want to give a special hello to those of our guests who are in the overflow rooms. Hello over there. I'm glad that we have a simulcast there so you can also enjoy our presentation today. I'm so glad to be back on stage and to be able to have this conversation that is very personal to me about study abroad experiences. The name of our plenary today is Study Abroad Experience Impact and Best Practices. In the past 3 decades, there's been a dramatic increase of study abroad opportunities for students of all different subject areas. And many of them are going to Chinese-speaking countries. We know that the study abroad experiences are often transformative for students in personal ways, but also in academic ways, and also even in professional ways. In addition, they can have a dramatic impact on students' linguistic abilities. Study abroad experiences foster a self-awareness, empathy, and connectedness, which once you have this experience, it's very difficult to kind of go back. So I know that we will talk about this today, but I myself was a study abroad student, and I met so many friends along the way, and it's been very interesting to see all the different places that my classmates ended up after their own study abroad experience. The Chinese language-focused study abroad field has greatly evolved over the last 30 years. And so today, our panelists will discuss this evolution, their own experiences participating in study abroad experiences, and as administrators of these programs as well, and how study abroad fosters academic growth and creates a pathway for career readiness. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest. Today, we have Dr. Zhang Baojun, who is the Vice President of Beijing Language and Culture University. Welcome. We have Holly Chang, who's the founder of Project Pengyo and the I Means Love, and the former Executive Director of the Committee of 100. We have Camilla Carter. She's a student at Tierra de la Sol Middle School. We have Carrie Feyerabend, Assistant to the Director of Binghamton University in New York. Mark Lenhart, who's the Executive Director of CET Academic Programs, and myself. So that's, if I could ask my guests to take the stage, and we can jump right into it. Welcome. So what I'm going to do to kick it off is ask you to each briefly introduce how your work is related to the study abroad experience. So maybe we can start all the way at the end here. Yes.
Sure. My name is Carrie Feyerabend. 中文名字是白科，白是白色的白，科是玉字旁可以的科，看起来王字旁可以的科。So my experience started at Binghamton University. I didn't know ni hao. I didn't speak a lick of Chinese when I started my career as a student. And through our Confucius Institute there, which partners with the National Academy of Chinese Theater Arts in Beijing, I started learning Chinese opera, and I went to that National Academy of Chinese Theater Arts, NACTA, where I was able to study and learn some Chinese opera, and then came back and started working at said Confucius Institute and actually used a different scholarship through the CI to go study a second time at Xiamen University. And now I work as the assistant to the director of that Confucius Institute. So 孔子学院培养了我，然后我现在在孔子学院工作，所以我现在可以培养这个美国学生在学习中文。
Excellent. Mark?
Well, first of all, thank you for including me today. There's nothing I like talking about more than China and study abroad, so this is a great topic for me. And I'm grateful to be in front of this great audience of language teachers, Chinese teachers. I think the work that you do to take students to the next level is really important, and it certainly helps us at CET. So we're grateful for that. I work at CET Academic Programs. I'm the executive director there. CET is a study abroad provider for high school, gap, and college students. Our roots are in China. We began there in 1982. And in fact, I studied in China with CET back in 1987. We have programs now in 10 countries, but China is one of our top destinations. We send about 600 students to China every year on short programs or semester or summer programs.
Great.
Hi, I'm Kamila Carter. I'm a 7th grade student at Terradosal Middle School. I grew up with 2 deaf parents and my little brother. So my mom's from Mexico and my dad grew up here in San Diego. And ever since I was little, I learned American Sign Language, English, and Spanish. And then my dad always had a love for languages. So once it was time for me to go to kindergarten, they were trying to find a program that could teach me a new language. So then we found Riverview International Academy, and that's where I started learning Chinese. And so I've been learning Chinese ever since then, and now I'm in 7th grade. So I've been learning Chinese for 8 years now.
Wow. Wonderful. Dr. Zhang?
Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Zhang Baojun, the VP of Beijing Language and Culture University. I've been in this position for a few years, supervising the university's international engagement, university partnership, and joint research efforts with overseas universities. So I'm really directly related to the student mobility initiative. So as you all know, BLCU is the only university in China whose major business is in promoting the Chinese language and the culture overseas. We run the largest Chinese program in China. The program has 330 full-time faculty members. Every year we receive over 6,000 international students from over 150 countries. We run 20 Confucius Institutes and independent Confucius classrooms across the world. So lots of work, lots of collaborations international. So I'm very happy, also honored to be invited to be at this global Chinese conference.
And we're so happy to have you. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, are there any graduates in the audience from Beijing Language and Culture University?
Wow.
A few, yes. They're everywhere you go, yes. That's wonderful. Holly?
Hi, my name is Holly Chang. I'm the founder of a program called Project Pengyou. And Project Pengyou is actually a national community of alumni of both Americans and Chinese who have studied in both countries. So we set up chapters across the United States in America to promote friendship, to promote U.S.-China bridge building and leadership on campuses. We have about 80 chapters at the moment. And so if you have students that have studied in both countries, we would love to work with you to start a chapter.
Great. And did you have a study abroad experience yourself?
I did. Mm-hmm. I studied actually I was not a traditional student, and I had been working as an engineer, of all things, for about 6 years before I was living in America and grew up in America, and my Chinese parents were sick, and I didn't know that they were sick, and we had a communication gap. And so when I found out that my father was going back to heart surgery, so his second heart surgery, I had this breakdown and thought, oh, I need to study Chinese. So I actually left my job, quit, sold my house, sold my car, sold everything, and moved to Beijing. And I first enrolled at Tsinghua, and then I enrolled at Beiyou, and studied Chinese for a year. And then after that, I just realized that, oh, there's like more people like my parents than there are like me in the world. There's so many Chinese people in the world, so I decided to actually start a nonprofit because of my study abroad experience, and have been doing it ever since.
Wonderful. I myself studied at Peking University, so we'll try to make it work. I know that Tsinghua. And it was an amazing experience myself. I was a recipient from the China Scholarship Fund and did 1 year at Beida. And I will say, too, it just gave me such clarity about what I wanted to do in my career, and I feel so grateful for that experience. So, Dr. Zhang, let me ask you, at Beijing Language and Culture University, I know that you've been there for almost 30 years? Yeah, so you started when you were a teenager. And I imagine you've seen a big transformation of what a student looks like when they are coming, right? How prepared they are for their experience. So can you talk a little bit about sort of how students have changed in the last 30 years, the type of student that you're seeing at the university?
I've been working in this university since 1991. Because the university's major business is to receive international students, I do see the change of some kind of trend. I may share a few numbers for you. In 1950s, because BLCU was set up in 1962, before BLCU, it was Peking University who received the first group. In 1950, we had only 33 international students in Peking University for the preparatory Chinese course. And when BLCU was created, at that year in 1962, we had 500. That increase is dramatic during the 1960s. But you know the Cultural Revolution is 1966 to 76. So university closed. International students were sent back home. So by the year 1972, universities resumed their teaching and BLCU reopened. We received the first group of students. It's about 1,000 students in BLCU. We were, at that time, the only university who had international students. Everything happened dramatically after 1978. That was the year when China adopted the policy of opening and reform, opening up and reform. So in the year 1978, we had only 1,700 students. And since then, the incoming students from different parts of the world growed so dramatically. By the year 2017, like the year before, right, we had 490,000 international students. BLCU every year have over 10,000 person time international students. That's the growth. I see BLCU's evolution of international education is exactly a picture of China's opening up and reform, along with China's growing in economy, in political stability, strengthening of its academic educational quality. More students began to come. So now I found that the trend is the first, more and more students began to pursue a degree in China. That's exactly the manifestation of China's educational quality has improved. The second trend is I found much younger students on our campus, high school students, middle school students who come to BLCU to spend 1 or 2 weeks to learn a little bit Chinese. Most of the time, they'd like to experience Chinese different cultures because we are so diversified, right? 56 nationalities or ethnic groups. So students travel to different places to see the country. The third trend is most of the study abroad groups, when they come to BLCU, they have some project to do, not just for fun. They have some project to do investigations, to research. When they finish their study in BLCU, they usually hold a small seminar. Everybody present their research to the peers. So to me, this is so great. I mean, with the growth of the number, becomes more depth study abroad and more rewarding experience for the students. So BLCU is still building new programs. I think the influence, the impact of receiving international students on the university is also in depth. For the first thing, we learn so much from these students and also from the universities or schools where the students were from. The second thing is, in order to cater to the students' special demands, we developed many new courses, new programs. For students who had zero Chinese, we even provide lectures, a series of lectures in English so that they can have a doorway to know China, and then we add some Chinese course. So the university developed, the educational system developed, our course system developed, and also students learned more. So this is a really not win-win, it's a triple win or quadruple win situation for receiving international students. So BLCU will continue to do that. And also the country, China, the country will also open its door wider to welcome more international students to study. For short term, for short course, for longer term, for degree, for PhD, whatever student. This is the national policy. I don't think it will change in the foreseeable future.
That's great. I know the College Board has been fortunate enough to be able to work with BLCU on different programs. And it's so funny to be on campus at a university like BLCU because you can see there's a whole range of types of students from the sort of casual first step to the HSK students, right, who are just, that's all they're doing. So it's wonderful. But that's changed so much over the years as well. So it's tremendous what you're doing.
There are many amazing stories. Students came for only 3 months, then they could talk quite well. Even they got some accent, special Beijing dialect, right? It's not that good, but they like that. So many slangs of Beijing slangs. So we had to tell the student that don't try to follow that, right? It's not elegant, not standard, right? So something like that. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Mark, I'm interested, and so your organization offers a huge range of different types of programs. What sort of trends are you seeing in the choices that students are making right now for their study abroad experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I studied in China, I was in a cohort of students, many of whom were academic year students. We went for the full year. And we went because we were interested and we wanted to learn Chinese, but we weren't thinking that far ahead. Fortunately, learning Chinese was useful for me. But today's students are much more explicit, much more intentional about what they want to do and how they want their China experience to translate into a career. So we're really seeing that on all of our programs, and not just, I would say, not just at the college level, but I think also high school, pre-college students, GAP students are very clear that they want to use their China experience for something else. And it may be passing an AP exam or becoming a better applicant for their college of choice. But I think intention is an important part of what's going on now. What's interesting to me is I think the skills that students learn while they're abroad, especially in a place like China where they're bombarded by things that are so confusing or disorienting every day. I think what they really learn are problem-solving skills, creativity. They learn to become comfortable with, tolerant of ambiguity, we say, right? And those are skills that are often needed in their careers. And I think the trick is helping them figure out that those skills are things, in addition to their language skills, that they can maybe discuss in an interview and have their potential employer really understand that they've gained.
That's interesting. And that profile, sort of the student that's looking for rigor, right? Is that, and is willing to move to China and participate in that, is that something you see with other countries, students going to other countries, would you say? Or do you think that because these students have already sort of signed on to Chinese, they have a sort of a different profile?
I do think the student who chooses China is unique.
Okay.
And I think they are very intentional about what they're doing. One thing that's very interesting is we see, if you look at study abroad in general, the ratio of men and women studying abroad, there's a great imbalance. It's something like 70% female and 30% male. But that's not true in China. It tends to be more 50-50. And I can't begin to explain why that is, except that I think that there's something about the idea that this will help students get ahead in their careers that is attractive to men as well as women.
That's great. So let's talk about that, because I do think a lot of students are pursuing both Chinese and also a study abroad experience, because I do hope to leverage that into a career or as a skill set that they bring into their career. Holly, you oversee a vast network of alumni, of students who have gone to China and have gone on to do various different things. Can you tell us sort of some interesting sort of examples of students who have participated in your program?
You mean like the types of jobs?
Yeah, the types of jobs and where have they ended up?
Okay, well, one of the things that I recognized in my network of alumni is that once Americans go to China and come back, their dreams get bigger. Their world gets bigger, their dreams get bigger. And so these are students that now want to go, work at the State Department. They want to go start their own companies. They want to go into education. They want to make the world a better place. They want to work on climate change. They want to work on things that are outside of themselves because they were able to get out of their bubble. So I don't have a particular field where I think they've been concentrated. I've seen them all over every industry, from consulting, management consulting, to the government, to tech startups. I just feel a sense of energy in students that have gone abroad and come back that I don't see generally in the rest of the population.
Right. It's interesting. I was on looking at LinkedIn recently, right, and updating my profile or whatever, and I noticed that I could put in my university, my Chinese university, as alumni in the program, and then it shows you other people who are alumni, right? So it's a networking thing, and it was the range of fields that people ended up in was so exciting to me. Because I think initially, there was an idea that you go abroad and maybe you become a language teacher, which we do hope is happening quite a bit. But I saw a lot of people in the medical field and legal field, et cetera, all over. So it's very exciting, and I would hope to think that they are leveraging that experience and particularly their linguistic skills on a daily basis. So Camilla, you're quite early in this path, right? But you've done so much already. So talk a little bit about your own experience and how learning Chinese has opened doors for you.
Well, like I said earlier, I've been learning Chinese since kindergarten, so I kind of grew up with Chinese. Like, I can't imagine my life without, not having Chinese and like China's culture and everything. And I feel like growing up with it, it's changed me. I wouldn't be the person I am today without Chinese because it's opened so many doors. I've been able to go to China. I've been able to participate in, competitions and speak at panels like these. And you go to all these events where I've been able to meet new people and, understand their language and better understand those people as well. And I've also gone to Mexico many times, and eating their food and different culture, and then go to China and they have their food and their culture, like the abacus and all their great architecture, and that's so different from it is here in America. And just being able to speak at conferences and do all those kinds of things, it's helped me open my mind to want to learn even more languages and not just stay in my little bubble and be able to meet new people and try new things. And it's just really helped me get a better understanding of the whole world, because especially not only verbally, but using sign language as well. Because when I was in China one time, I was able to meet a man, and he was deaf, but he used Chinese sign language, and I only knew American sign language. So it was a little hard to communicate, but I was able to learn so much from him and how he grew up, and compare that to how my parents grew up and how my life is with my parents, because it definitely is different than it is in China than it is here for deaf people. And being able to see the different language itself it just really was an eye-opener for me.
That's great. And I'd just like to point out to our friends from higher education, Camilla's on her way. So I think you will be a hot asset when you apply, and I really look forward to seeing what the trajectory is for you as you move forward. Carrie, talk a little about, if you could talk too, because I think your study abroad experience you've been able to leverage into a career in a very interesting way. So can you tell us a little bit more about your path and how you got there?
Sure. So I had always loved languages, had an affinity for languages, and my study abroad experiences have run the gamut from studying at NACTA, which was very small, very liberal arts. There were maybe a handful of us who were the foreigners, and so we had to make friends with these Chinese peers, and we would go out and have dinner together. And I think that's where I was able to improve my spoken Chinese because that was what I was surrounded with. And then I actually studied in Spain, and I lived with a host family for a full year, and that was a completely different experience. And then I studied at Xiamen University, and that was a much more traditional, lots of foreign Chinese or foreign students who are all learning Chinese, but that was much more of an immersion program where it increased my vocabulary, it increased my reading and my writing and my listening skills. And we talked about, I think it was problem solving. And in Beijing, it was, I don't know how to get on the bus. My language skills weren't that good. But in Xiamen, it was very academic. And you mentioned I was one of those HSK students by the end, studying all those words and trying to cram them all into my mind and thinking, I don't think I'm getting any better. I think I've plateaued. But in fact, I hadn't. It's just a persistent study to continue. And for me, it was especially helpful because I started my job not having been to Xiamen yet. So I had a working knowledge of the language, and I could do okay. But then coming back from Xiamen and continuing my job really, I think, put me on another level, another playing field of being able to write emails and communicate efficiently in Chinese with our sponsor at Hanban in China and communicate with directors from all over the US for when we're going out to do performances. And now I moderate those performances. And I also perform Beijing opera because I studied at NACTA. So I perform Tianyu Sanhua, which is the heavenly maid scatters flowers. So having that diverse background has definitely, I think, made me a more well-rounded person, but to be able to see those different facets everywhere in the world, and it all starts with me meeting you, just one-to-one communication and being able to open that bridge and share my personal story and hear the personal story from the Chinese side, and then being able to grow those communications into a network that helped me ultimately land where I am, working daily with Chinese teachers in the Chinese language program.
That's wonderful. Mark, I wondered, have you seen a shift in where people are ending up after these programs? Or, even you talked about intent before, just even a shift in the intent that they bring to the programs?
There's definitely a change. I think what I find interesting is now there are many more kinds of programs where students can go and study things other than language, right? We work with Middlebury College on the Middlebury School for the Environment, for instance, and that's a really interesting program where students are doing a lot of coursework that's not in Chinese. We have an internship program in Shanghai where students come in with very basic Chinese and are able to have very interesting internships, very successful placements. And that's not something I could have imagined when I was a student or even that long ago. So I think what's different is that there are different kinds of opportunities, and some of them are more focused and more specific than just the general language and culture program that has existed for 30 years.
Interesting.
I also want to say that I think that there are different kinds of students that are also going, and there are programs that are widening access to different kinds of students that are going. And CET seems to have a very new and exciting program that's doing that. Do you want to talk about that, Mark?
Sure. Well, it's true that study abroad has traditionally been for students who have money, for the very privileged students, and I think the field of study abroad has recognized that and has done a lot to try to change that. And one of the big changes in study abroad, not just in China, but in the United States in general, is that the number of ethnic minorities has increased significantly in the last 10 years. Minorities were about 15% of the students studying abroad in 2007, 2008, and it's about 30% now. So that's the good news, that there has been progress made. People from CET and other colleagues in the field work together to create something called the Fund for Education Abroad, which is a scholarship organization that gives students who might not otherwise have the chance to study abroad scholarships. And we've been very successful in building on FEA's first few years, and the last cohort was about we gave out almost 500,000, no.
It's $500,000.
We gave out a lot of money. People from FEA will kill me that I don't remember exactly how much. But we've been very successful in raising money and I think really starting to move the needle when it comes to students who are underrepresented and who might not otherwise study abroad.
And that's very exciting because I think in our classrooms across the United States, we also see that shift of the demographic of students who are learning Chinese and choosing to pursue that. So I'm so glad to hear that this is also moving in that direction as well. Where can the teachers in our audience find out more information about this?
Sure. Fundforeducationabroad.org is the website.
Great.
And if you're interested in volunteering or donating, there's lots of information there about doing that.
That's wonderful. Dr. Zhang, I'm curious because I noticed last time I was on your campus something very different about the population of students, right? We talked about a demographic shift. And I think, China has sort of the One Belt, One Road initiative, and I think that you're seeing a different group of students we didn't see 10 years ago. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the shift of the demographics of students who are coming?
The first, I have to make it clear that students from the U.S. always ranked in BLCU, ranked number 4, number 5.
Number 4, number 5.
The number is very stable for my university. Well, BLCU is just a perfect sample of the whole international students population in China. In 1950s, like 60s, I just mentioned, students are mainly from our East European countries. And then gradually, it's only in 1991, Chinese government allowed universities to have international students who pay their own fees, not on Chinese government scholarship. So since 1991, the number grows so rapidly. As I mentioned, by the year 2017, we had 490,000 already. Majority of them are from, let me give you the ranking. Number 1 is Korean students. Number 2, Japanese. Not Japanese. Number 2 is Thailand. Number 3 is Indonesia. The BLCU's sampling of the students' number. Number 4 is like United States. We have 800 to 900 American students. Number 5 is like Malaysia or Southeast Asian countries, and also other Asian countries. So this is roughly the distribution of students. Due to the Belt Road Initiative, we receive more and more students from African countries, from Latin American countries, from Middle Asian countries. So now the students is more varied, for the students coming from different parts of the world. And we are happy that. Also, the other thing I want to add is, although we have such a large number of American students, all of them are short-term students for several weeks only. So far, we don't have degree students. Of course, there are many reasons behind that. So this raises a lot of challenges for BLCU to innovate our teaching methods, right? Because your students come from more countries, are so diversified. And the second thing is developing textbooks, right? New textbooks catering to the needs of students from different parts of the world. And the third is we do need a threshold. So far, we don't have that. That's a placement test. Not placement test, exactly. Not like TOEFL or IELTS. That's the students' language proficiency test. We have HSK, which was developed by BLCU in 1980s. But band 1, band 2, 3, or 4, 6, 5, 6 now is not suitable for the current students. We need to develop a new Chinese language proficiency test, which can prove that the students can move to our normal university class, not only in the language class. So these are the challenges universities are faced with. And we have realized that the situation, the universities developing lots of human resources and also fund to develop new textbooks and new teaching methodologies. Yeah.
That's great. It's funny, the diversity on a campus and a study abroad experience, I think, is not something that we talk about usually right in the front end of our discussion. We're more thinking about being in another country and just the challenges that come with that. But I actually found when I was at Beida, it was so unexpected when I entered my classroom, and we weren't allowed to speak English ever, and so our Chinese was our common language. But then my language partner that we were paired up with was from North Korea. In 2002, right? So we had a lot to talk about as far as public events. But it was a wonderful. It was a wonderful way to make a friend, right? And I never would have had that experience if I wasn't in that classroom, right? And so I think it was such an unexpected value added, and it was part of my own shift of perspectives. And I think that is a huge part of this. We talk about frameworks, right? Once these frames get big, it's very hard to close them again. Right? So, yes, it's very, very exciting. Linguistic readiness, right? So it's a hot topic in our audience, right? Students being ready and proficient in a language. How important is it at the front end of a study abroad experience to have a high level of linguistic readiness?
I personally would say that linguistic willingness is much more important than readiness, because on the flip side, we receive lots of teachers, specifically from NACTA. They don't have time to learn English. They're learning Beijing opera since they've been 8 years old. And we've had teachers who come who their English is only so-so when they leave 2 years later, and people who come who say, how does my English get better? How do I do this? I want to get better. And by the end, their English has grown leaps and bounds. So I think the reverse is exactly the same. When I went to China the first time, my Chinese wasn't that great. I got by, and then I was taught, and then I went back, and then I went back, and I participated in Chinese Bridge, and I was conversing with people from all over the world in Chinese. And then in Xiamen, my roommate who had been there for 6 years, she could speak it, but then still with store owners, I had to translate for her because my pronunciation was better. So I think just getting your foot in the door and having that desire to learn, regardless of your skill level, you will learn once you're there. It's do or die. But if you want to flourish, you just have to have that willingness, I think.
That's absolutely right. I remember it was noodles or no noodles for me. And I was definitely going noodles, so
I had a lot of
great,
yeah.
it was a great way to learn, yes. Other thoughts?
I totally agree. In BLCU, we have the 2 weeks or 4 weeks very intensive course. Even you don't know any of Chinese, you still learn Chinese in that short period very quickly. I still remember my first experience in the study abroad in Scotland, in Edinburgh University. I learned English for many, many years. Right? I was supposed to be a university English teacher, but when I first arrived there, people greeted me like, hi there. I was totally at a loss as to what he means. Why hi there, not here? Or what we learned in China is, how are you? I'm fine, and you, I'm me too, right? Something like that. He didn't follow that routine and give me something new. So it seems that I'm linguistically ready for that, but actually it took me 3 to 4 months to get used to the Scottish accent, right? They say, pass me the hat, please. So pass me the hat, please. It's so difficult to understand what it is, right? So, but gradually, very soon, if you have the desire, you have the motivation, you have the strong will, you quickly pick up and I can even speak in the Scottish accent. try to simulate that. So I think strong will and motivation and the determination to learn the language well is more important than whether you're ready or not before you go. Right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I just want to add, based on the stories here, even if your students don't speak the language or don't even have that much of a will, you can encourage them to grow. And once they go, they will have the will. Once they go and they come back, they will have the will to learn Chinese. They will have the will to want to go back. So I would not, you're in a perfect position to inspire more people to go to China to study abroad. And not just that, I think that the context of study abroad between the US and China can't be understated. The US-China relationship, as we all know, is increasingly important. It's increasingly complex. it's increasingly hostile. And the only way that it's going to change is if more people are building bridges, if there are more friendships across the board, if there are more people in schools that are coming together and collaborating. So I would not put down the importance of your roles as teachers in schools.
Absolutely, and particularly it's fun with young students, right? I used to have the opportunity to take high school students to China, and they had a period of time where they would actually do homestays with local Chinese students, right? And what are they talking about? I would kind of say like, what are you guys talking about? Hip hop. It's like they found that they had so much more in common because and our students were so surprised at how modern China was, and I think that for young people to build friendships is very easy. And it was sort of easier the younger they were. And so it was very inspiring to see them, and also how they quickly would adapt to Chinese technology. My first time using WeChat was, like a freshman in high school taught me how to use it. And they really adapt to it. But again, those are relationships that you can never take back, right? And perspectives that you can never take back. So that's very, very exciting. Part of the reason we wanted to have this conversation today as well was to sort of inspire the teachers in the audience to feel empowered to have the conversation about study abroad with their own students, right? And I know that there's a lot of different programs out there, but I'm wondering, are we able to meet the demand? Mark, do you see that there's a bigger demand than we can meet, or is the demand changing in some way?
I think the demand is changing. I think that's right. I think at the college level in the United States, it's not that it's growing necessarily. I think it is growing at the high school, pre-college level, and a gap year. And I think there's a lot more interest there. And I agree, the students at the high school level are so enthusiastic and so excited. And I think sending them at an early age gets them that much more motivated. It's really a springboard for their next experience. And part of the reason we got involved with high school programs is we thought about a pipeline for students going on to study Chinese at the college level or to go on CET programs also in the future. So the demand is different. We're seeing at the college level that students are interested in going for shorter periods of time, and we've talked about that a little bit. We have about the same number of students going to China every year, but a smaller percentage every year is going for semester programs, because that seems like too big of a commitment for today's college students. They're happy to go for the summer, they're happy to go for a 4-week program with a faculty member, or a 2-week program with a faculty member, but going for more than that is hard for a lot of them. Sometimes it's because they're double majors or they have a lot of commitments at home. But we're seeing that the demand is shifting, and it's moving towards shorter programs, at least at the college level.
It's interesting. I wonder, though, there's an ongoing national conversation about the rising price of higher education,
Yep.
right, and access. I wonder if there might be a point where international universities become more appealing for American students, if nothing else, just not for the experience, but for the costs as well.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's already happening at the graduate level, right? There's some amazing programs, new programs in China that I know that some of the CT graduates are taking advantage of. There are new programs like the Enjing Academy or the Schwarzman Scholars Program, or other programs that students can take advantage of to get a degree. Sometimes there are scholarship programs that are completely paid for either by that organization or by China.
That's right. So Camilla, you have a lot of studying ahead of you and a lot of opportunities, and I've heard you speak Chinese, and it's quite outstanding. Do you have are you thinking now about a long-term study abroad experience in China later on?
Well, I've been to China. My longest time in China was a month, and I stayed with the host family. And that was, very great experience for me because, I had to speak to them in Chinese. When I was at school, my teacher spoke Chinese, but if I didn't know a word in Chinese, I could just tell them in English and they would understand me just fine. But when I was, in China in a host family, they didn't know English. So I had to, describe the word that I needed so that they knew what I wanted or what I wanted to do. I couldn't just tell them in English and they would understand me. So, that pushed my Chinese, to better my Chinese because I had to use, my prior knowledge to describe the word so I could just, get by. But definitely when I'm older, I would love to stay in China for a while. Probably not too long because I feel like I'd get homesick. And the 2 times that I've gone, I've been by myself. I've never gone, with a family member or anyone. So, it was very scary for me. But everyone was just so welcoming and, so kind and understanding that, it made me want to go back. And even though when I left here, it was sad, but when it was time to come back home, I didn't want to leave because, they were just so kind and sweet. So I definitely, when I'm older, I do want to maybe stay a year next time, to, increase my Chinese learning and maybe do a year in like college or something. I don't really know what I want to do when I'm older or, because that's quite a while away. But I know that whatever I end up doing, it's definitely going to be using my languages and learning more languages to, better understand, the world and, have those communication bridges between one another to, help with my job, help with their job, maybe increase our technology or I don't know, whatever we might be talking about. But, definitely continue to learn and continue to go to new places and, continue to just expand, learning and communication and all that kind of stuff. So.
I think all of my colleagues in the audience would agree. I mean, you've already taken such tremendous steps for your age. You should be very proud of yourself. And
Thank you.
I think we're all going to be excited to watch your trajectory. So we have just about 5 more minutes left, and I wanted to empower our audience to have conversations with their students about study abroad. So as an open question, what advice would you give to the teachers in the audience about how to talk about study abroad with their students? Like, what are some bullet points and to kind of energize them so that it's relevant to them, but also accessible?
I personally would say, with our performance group, we go around, we also give talks, and we've given some talks to some high school students. We were in Montana, and we were teaching a theater class, and another English class had to go too, and the one student was like, I don't know anything about Chinese opera, what do I care? And he came away seeing these guys using their swords and their spears and fighting, and he was like, well, that's cool, I want to do that. So, connect with your students and find what they like to do. If they like to paint, you should look at shufa, look at Chinese calligraphy, look at Chinese painting. Oh, you like art? Well, look, these are Chinese shadow puppets. You could do this. So I think finding an aspect of the culture that relates to them. If they like comics, then introduce them to Chinese comics. If they like music, introduce them to Chinese music. Help them recognize that there's a Chinese counterpart to whatever type of culture they already are invested in the U.S., and that connection for them might be, okay, well, if I can further this and learn this more in China, maybe I want to go. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the language, but just the interest in another culture can get them to that point where now they want to go experience it in real time in the authentic way. And so I think connecting on that level is a huge part of it.
That's great. Other thoughts, advice?
I was going to say that I think too often we get caught up in, what will happen with their Chinese when they get back, or will the coursework maybe not align, or what if they learn things that are different than this class is learning? And I think, to me, that's a mistake. I think there's no student who goes to China who doesn't come back completely committed to learning Chinese because they see how important it is, and they see how far they have to go with it. So I would encourage teachers to really push their students to go and put aside maybe the smaller concerns about problems that could come from it. Because I think in the grand scheme of things, the getting them abroad is a huge step forward, and it really sort of solidifies their commitment to learning Chinese.
That's great. Holly?
Go ahead. No, Dr. Zhang,
So
please.
in China, at the level of at college level, we have a different story. I mean, teachers don't have to push the students go abroad to study. The students, all of them want to. So my job, the international office has to find right places for them to go to, right universities to go to. Well, some students are financially, they're not strong enough. You have to find like community colleges in the United States, some colleges in the UK, which they can pay, right? The universities subsidize them a little bit, but not much. So my job is to fly in here and there, finding new partners where students can go to. So this is one thing. The second thing is, it's just China's tradition, right? Parents, grandparents, grandparents all saved all their life just for this only kid to study in a good university, right? So that will be no problem. The third one is the government even, to some extent, encourages this trend. Like everybody here maybe know 户口, right? In Beijing, if you are not a Haigui, you cannot work in Beijing, right? Although people say, we are not no sea turtle again, we are sea grass now. But still, if you are sea turtle, you will get that residence permit in Beijing, find a job. Otherwise, no way. So that, in some other sense, encourage people to go abroad. Not for short time, but for a degree. At least you have to have a master degree, right? So that's why Chinese students tend to make good use of their money to stay a little bit longer. Like we developed the double degree programs, 2 years in US and 2 years in China, and finally they get 2 degrees. So they tend to stay longer and get a degree and finally come back. They can find a job in a big city they like. Otherwise, no way. So we're not pushing them, but we are trying to find good places for them.
And I just want to build on what Dr. Zhang said. So you have Chinese students that are begging to go out of the country, and they really want to go out. I don't know exactly what the numbers are of Americans. Like if you just surveyed Americans across the board and how many people actually have studied in China in their lives, I think it's something like 1 in 1,000. Like it's something like there'll be crickets. Nobody's gone to China, and yet every single business in America that wants to survive globally, every single institution in America that wants to survive globally cannot do it without an understanding of the way that China is doing things. So I would say that you can't do enough to, even if we increased it by 20%, 50%, then that's like 1.5 people out of 1,000 people. We're just not doing enough. So I think that everybody in this room is actually hopefully a beaming light of that example that going abroad is necessary, and you're the bridge to bring them there. My advice, just take the first practical step. Encourage every single one of your students to go get a passport. Just get that passport. And once they have the passport, then you can talk about the next step.
That's wonderful advice. Well, we've come to the end of our time. I've so enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you all for all that you've contributed. And I feel very excited about the future for study abroad opportunities, and I hope that you leave today feeling the same and feel empowered to have conversations with your students and connect them to resources. So thank you all very much, and thank you to a wonderful audience.